What's going on, guys? Nate here with Hood Rat Racing Co. coming at you with another video, and today's gonna be a little different. We're actually not working on the Mustang, we're working on my truck today. This is my 96 Ford Ranger that I've been using as a daily driver for the past couple years, and honestly, it's been a phenomenal truck. I really have no complaints about this thing. It's been super reliable. Unfortunately, though, the weather hasn't been that great, and the truck decided it wanted to develop a pretty nasty power steering leak. The low pressure line, I don't have a flashlight on me right at the moment, but you can see that little line poking out from under the power steering pulley. It's a hard line, and that seems to be where it's leaking from. It's all wet, and there's fluid all over it, and it's dripping. So the goal is to pull the pump, inspect the pump, make sure it's still good and not damaged, and change the low pressure and the high pressure line going to the gearbox. So that's going to be the subject of today's video, is servicing your power steering system on a 96 Ford Ranger with a 2.3. So let's get right into it.
Smoking on the stove, also known as patch gas. We got them gas, we won't cut no slack. Any Fendi slacks, all these big effects. I'm all about the stack, they got guns to practice, and that be the OG, just to be exact.
As you can see, I kind of started pulling stuff apart just to make some room and have some easy access. So I ended up pulling the hot air intake off, which is laying over here, just so I had room to kind of get the serpentine belt off, as well as disconnecting some of the harness that was over here. You can see I kind of got it laying over there right now, but like our connectors for like our missions equipment, there's a connector down there, and a couple random things, got the battery disconnected. One thing I do want to mention is you do have to take the power steering pump pulley off to get to the bolts for the pump itself. And as you know, engineers at Big 3 love finding new ways to challenge technicians. So this is a power steering pulley remover. I got this from AutoZone 5031. That's the part number for the kit. This is about 40 bucks to rent, and I'll show you how it works. So basically, for the lack of a better term, this is plastic. Just straight up, no metal, not aluminum, nothing. It's plastic. And if you try and use a pulley puller, like a jaw puller on this, as you can see, somebody in the past has tried, not me, it'll break it. It'll just start fracturing. So what you do is you get this little pulley kit here. So what you do is you set this guy on here, and it'll fit. Obviously, it won't be this run down this far, but it'll fit in the indentation in the shaft of the pump. And then these little collars go around, and you can see there's a raised lip there. And these collars will kind of lock onto that, right? And then you get this little like outside collar that kind of holds it all together, makes it all pretty. And you just crank her down, and it grabs the pulley by that snout that I was showing right there and forces it off. So as you can see, it started getting a little bit of a mushroom from how much force was being exerted on that. But it will get the pulley off. There is a chance it could break. Again, it is old plastic, but it should be fine. Part stores do have replacements for these trucks. So if you're doing a power steering pump on a 96 Ranger, you can get a pulley pretty cheap if you damage yours. So just something to point out. The next thing I'm going to do is probably start undoing the lines for the pump themselves, and then start letting this drain. I'll probably have to get the jack under the truck so I can slide this drain pan under, because it doesn't slide through with the truck being lowered, and catch all the stuff that's draining out of the system. And then once that's done, we'll start cracking the bolts for the pump itself and seeing what we get into. So let's get into it. All right, so we got everything pulled apart now, and I just want to show you guys this because it could be different for you guys, right? So this truck, I just want to start off with this. This truck was a factory AC truck. It did have everything for air conditioning, but the truck was in an accident prior to me owning it, and there was a lot of stuff that was messed up. So I ended up pulling all the AC stuff off and getting rid of it, and it ends up helping me out in this case because I'm able to pull the accessory drive bracket off with very little difficulty. Now, if your truck isn't an AC truck or you deleted it, you can do the same thing and pull this bracket off, and it's all nice and free and open, and nothing is in your way anymore, because you got to get wrenches down to these fittings, and the bracket does a pretty good job of covering those. So it's kind of a pain to get to with that bracket installed. Now, if you have AC on your truck and you're planning on keeping it, you can unbolt the compressor and kind of move everything out of the way, but you still have lines and other stuff that's going to be in your way. But it can be done, and it can still be done with that accessory drive bracket on it. I guess it's really a matter of how much you want to deal with it and fight with it. But I don't. So I took the bracket off and just put it to the side. I got to clean it. And I started cleaning down here because this truck has had a power steering leg for probably longer than I've been around, honestly. All this stuff was absolutely coated in sludge. So I got some brushes and some purple power and some brake clean and started scrubbing everything down. Especially around these fittings here. You don't want anything falling in. As you can see, there is little particles of debris I'm going to have to get out of there before we get our new fittings. But, yeah, you want to get this thing as fairly clean as you can. Especially since this is the original gearbox. I'm sure it hasn't seen the light of day since like 97, 98. Whenever this thing really started leaking. Couple other things to note here. If you really want to speed up the process, not only can you take off that bracket, but you cut the lines. So as you can see here, instead of diddling with it with wrenches, you just cut the line and you can put a socket and an extension on it, which is what I did. And both of mine were 5/8. I don't know if that was just all the grime or what, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be different sizes, but they were the same. They were both 5/8. So, yeah, like I said, I just cut the fittings off, pulled the lines out, and then I just put a socket with a long extension on to get them out. Made pretty quick work of it. So another thing, too, is I don't know in the automotive world if 3 years is really a long time or not. It really doesn't seem like it, but this pump's junk. It doesn't turn very easy at all. It's actually, I don't know, it almost feels gritty. And there is a lot of end play, which I wish I could show you here. Actually, yeah, there's a decent amount of end play here. So I think it's safe to say that this pump is actually might be burned up. So we're going to have to replace that, unfortunately. Another thing for the checkbook, but it is what it is. So we're going to do a new high pressure and low pressure line and a new compressor, or pump, I should say, and a new pulley because mine's damaged and might as well throw a new one. So, yeah. I got to use that as the parts getter now, so I got to fire this thing up, let it warm up, and we're going to run to the parts store and see what we got. All right, guys, so we went on our parts run, took the old girl up to AutoZone, picked up all our parts. Luckily, the store near me had everything I needed. They had the 2 new lines, the new pump, and the new pulley, and I picked up some trans fluid to refill this thing with because Ford likes using trans fluid instead of regular power steering fluid. Whatever. The new lines are in. As you can see, this is about how you want them to look, how they need to look. One thing to note, the line does come with a new Teflon lock or washer, which you need for that to seal. Otherwise, it's going to leak like it has been, because whoever put the power steering pump in didn't put the seal in. But whatever, it's a story for another time, I guess. But we got the new lines in. I reused my steering pressure sensor, and basically what this does is it's supposed to tell the truck to bump up the idle or whatever RPM, like without load you're at, to turn the wheel. Because I don't know if you guys have ever experienced it, but if you go to turn, like say you go steering full lock and you're just sitting at like a dead stop, right? The truck will actually start idling down and trying to stall from the load of the power steering pump. So this basically tells the ECU to bump everything up so the truck doesn't die. I don't know if it's just because my connector was so nasty or what, but it doesn't work. So I'm going to clean the connector out on the harness and see if we can get that working. But the new lines are in. One thing that is kind of odd, well, 2 things. You can see how closely these lines get to each other. It's just the way it is. They don't touch, and they're not going to move, so I'm not really concerned about it. But the other thing is down here, instead of having some kind of like industrial hose clamp, they just put a regular like worm gear clamp on it. And you have to reorientate it. If you get the AutoZone one, you have to reorientate it to work correctly. And that's the best way I got it. It slips perfectly in there. And it actually, that little excess of hose clampage is actually up against the timing cover, the plastic timing cover right now. And it's slightly pushing the line away. So, I'm no physicist by any means, but that hose clamp is essentially going to save this line from rubbing and rupturing in the future, if my calculations are correct. Other than that, everything seems to be okay. Besides, like I said, you got to reclock that and install your lines and save your steering pressure sensor. These lines do come with, well, this high pressure one comes with a new seal and a plug if you want to opt out of using this. But because I already replaced this last year and want to have it, I'm just going to leave it in and reuse it. But you do have that option, which is kind of neat. So the part numbers for these lines right here, let's see. 7178, this was the high pressure line, if I remember correctly. And 80085 was the low pressure. So you got part numbers for that. We did get our new pump and everything as well. So now that these lines are in and everything's tight, I can reinstall the pump. All right, guys. So as you can see, it is the next day. Everything's all done. I really just wanted to get this done so I could drive this to work and whatnot. But everything came out nice. Surprisingly, there is 0 leaks. Thank goodness. So once you get your lines in, everything else actually goes pretty quickly. So the best thing I could recommend for the reinstall of everything is, obviously you got your new lines in, everything's kind of in its place, you got your accessory bracket on. Your best thing to do to start with is take your new pump and kind of put it in at an angle so you can get the return line on. Because as you can see, let's see if I can get a look at it. You can just barely see it down there with the little hose clamp on it. But it's kind of loose, so you want to get that on first and then at least get the clamp snug on it. And then you get your pump set in place and get your 3 bolts started to hold the pump in. And then you start getting this thing all ran through here to get this hooked back up. Take your time. Again, you don't want to strip anything. And once you get the fitting, the thread in, what you want to do is take a little bit of trans fluid and just kind of soak this fitting. Now, I'm pretty sure this is actually supposed to sit inside of the fitting on the pump itself, but for whatever reason, it didn't go in, and surprisingly, it's not leaking. So, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they do make a specific tool to reinstall this, but like I said, if you just lube it up, that's what I've always done over the years. Just lube it up with a little bit of trans fluid and just kind of hand start it and then run her down, and it should be fine. So once the pump lines are in fully installed, you can snug these bolts down. And then if you rented a pulley removal tool, you can use the tool to actually push it back in. It should have another, it's like a bolt with a collar on it. You run the bolt in as far as you can into the snout of the pump. There's actually threads in there. I don't remember the thread size, it didn't say it. I just found the bolt that worked in the kit. And then you hold the bolt with like a, I don't know, maybe like a 5/8 box end wrench, and then you crank there's like a cup that's threaded onto the bolt, and you run that down and it presses the pulley back onto the snout of the pump. And then once that's done, you just put your belt back on, make sure everything's good and whatnot. I would definitely recommend pre-filling the pump with fluid, just so if you go to start it, depending on how you want to bleed this, when you go to start it, the pump will be dry. So definitely start pre-filling it, start getting some of the lines in the pump kind of filled up, and then just let it sit for a minute while you're still assembling everything else, right? And then a quick and easy way to make short work of bleeding everything is, instead of just automatically firing the truck up and cranking the wheel full lock to full lock, what you do is you jack the front end of the truck up, and without the engine being fired up, you just put the key in and start cranking the wheel over. And it does it at a much lower pressure than if the vehicle was running. So it quickly bleeds the power steering system. It lets all the air bubbles come straight out of the rack or the gearbox and the lines and right back into the pump, where they can, you know, go into the reservoir or whatever. So you do that a couple times, and then you can set it down, fire it up, and start continuing to bleeding it. And it makes it'll turn like a 30-minute bleeding ordeal into like 5. So as you can see, I mean, it worked out fine. I've been driving this truck the past couple days now, so haven't really had an issue yet. Still sounds like a Ford power steering pump, you know how they sound, but relatively easy enough job, at least for my circumstances. Like I said, not having the AC installed really made quick work of everything and gave me enough access to really get to work on this thing. So yeah, that was the first video for the Ford Ranger here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, subscribe, let me know what you guys think and what you want to see in the future, and catch you in the next video.